What will be the deciding factors between the Florida Gators and Miami Hurricanes on Saturday? We'll talk about that here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free reviews of the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Tuesday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And I do have to talk about the deciding factors between this game because, like I've said, I think this game is going to be really close. You can disagree all you want. That's fine. A lot of people will disagree. Some side will be wrong, right? But for me, I think the biggest deciding factor for the Florida Gators is the offensive line. When you look at the offensive line last season, some of the worst offensive line play that we've seen at the University of Florida, and we've seen a lot of bad offensive line play. Yikes. There were obviously multiple reasons for that. Some of it was injury, some as in people getting forced into spots, poor people playing while injured, like Austin Barber is a namely one there that did not play well, dealt with injuries for the overwhelming majority of the season last year. But Richie Leonard IV, Micah Mazuka, gone. Damian George from tackle to guard, maybe starting. We'll see officially when the depth chart comes out, which is usually on Wednesdays, so should be tomorrow. But tomorrow we will talk about the Florida Gators depth chart and who I think winds up where. But Florida Gators last year gave up a lot of pressure, right? Again, I mean, Damian George is back. He gave up 29 pressures at tackle. Blocking at guard is easier. Pass blocking at guard is easier than tackle, but still, 29 was not a good number. Austin Barber gave up 16. Again, spent a lot of the season banged up. And Jake Slaughter gave up 9 pressures last season. That's not bad. There's another 30 from Richie and Micah, but obviously they are not here this year. And I've kind of gone on record and I've said, hey, I'm not entirely sold on Miami's defensive line. I'm not even saying that Miami's defensive line is going to be bad. That's not at all what I'm saying when I say I'm not sold on them. It's that there's production, but they are at different schools. Austin was productive at Marshall. That's not a power forward level, right? I think we can say it's reasonable to have some doubt about things like that. Simeon Barrow, not a good pass rusher, but whether or not that Miami defensive line is good, it's a recently put together defensive line, whether or not it's good, great, average, or horrible, the Gators offensive line needs to do their part, right? We saw far too often last year the offensive line let you down. In the run game, I think this year especially, or this week especially, it's really important to keep yourself ahead of the sticks. Keep yourself in a situation where the run is at least a threat. I'm not saying to run the ball all the time. I'm just saying keep yourself in a situation where the run's a threat. You can run play action without running the ball well. That's not even an opinion. That's a fact. Everything will back it up. Even if you're not running the ball well, play action passing more efficient than more effective than drop back passing. So you need to keep yourself in a spot where the run's at least a threat. It'll help your play action game whether or not you actually hand it off or not. So keeping yourself in that spot is important, and running the ball, particularly run blocking, will play a big part in that. You're going to need to pick up yardage on first down when you're probably going to run. I feel like that's a decent tendency of Billy Napier is to run the ball on first down. Got to put yourself in a plus situation at that point. And of course, we have to talk about pass protection, which we've talked about a good bit in recent weeks. Pass protection for the Florida Gators against Miami Hurricanes. I think that even if we talk about Alston, Mesidor, Simeon Barrow, CJ Clark, whoever you're talking about on that defensive line, I excluded one name in particular. Whether you're talking about any of them, whether they work out or not, you still have to deal with Ruben Bain. Ruben Bain's a very good pass rusher. We've acknowledged this on the show. By the way, if you're one of those Miami fans where you're like, you said Ruben Bain's a very good pass rusher. He's elite. He's the best we've ever seen. Shut the hell up. No one cares. I'm still complimenting the player, just because I'm not complimenting him as much as you think. You just sound stupid. Ruben Bain, very good pass rusher, but the rest of that defensive line, I need to see it. I need to see it. Messidor struggled to stay healthy, which means it's been hard to really get a proper evaluation of him. Tyler Barron has not been productive against Florida throughout the entirety of his career. And it's like he played opposite James Pierce last year, and James Pierce is probably going to be a top 5 pick. So it's not like Tyler Barron has struggled as the top pass rusher on the team. He hasn't been the top pass rusher on the team, and he hasn't been productive when he's played Florida. So I'm not going to just randomly believe he's going to. Like, this is one of those spots where you can go, oh, that was at his last school. That was whatever. Yeah, but it was against this school when their offensive line was historically bad, and he still wasn't good. I'm not banking on him being productive all of a sudden. CJ Clark's a relatively unproductive pass rusher. We could talk about production here in terms of snaps count, but most of Miami's defensive line has not had proven production in 2023 or against the Florida Gators. So I need to see it. Ruben Bain, absolutely agree. He's going to be a really good pass rusher. The rest of them, though, I just need to see it. Again, not saying that they're bad, just saying I have seen nothing that's going to make me go, oh, they're definitely going to be good. And I think that when it comes to dealing with pass protection, like I said, Florida Gators offensive line last year was bad. I need to see it from them too. I know if you're a Miami fan and you're new here, I'm not saying, oh, Florida Gators offensive line is going to be good this year. I'm saying I need to see it from them. So that's why I've been saying, whether or not Miami's defensive line is good or bad or average, I still need to see the Florida Gators offensive line play well. I think that when you talk about Ruben Bain, for example, who, again, proven pass rusher last year for Miami, when we talk about that, I think that you put Hayden Hansen in there. Hayden Hansen's 6'7" and 3/4, 265 pounds, I believe. Big dude, right? He's been your pass blocking tight end, one of the best blocking tight ends in the entire country last year, which that's another thing Miami fans just, when they go, oh yeah, Miami's tight ends, how? 200 yards combined last year. I don't care about a freshman. Like, no. Hayden Hansen, one of the most productive pass blocking tight ends or blocking tight ends in the country. Really effective as a pass blocker. He was a big help last year on the right side specifically. Halfway through the season, we started seeing him line up in between offensive linemen and blocking there. When we're talking about, Miami's best rushing threat is Ruben Bain, an edge rusher who has almost exclusively played on the edge. He played, I think, 6 snaps last year on the interior of the defensive line. So he's played almost exclusively on the edge. You go, well, if he's a really good edge rusher, we're going to have a tackle on him with a tight end. So I would expect that to be the approach instead of the running backs. I think a better approach for Florida's pass protection is tight end into pass block, running back, maybe a block and release. Maybe they go, hey, watch Francisco Mauigoa. He's probably going to be their leading blitzer as an off-ball player. Watch him. If he's blitzing, then you're pass pro. If he's not, then you're leaking out into a flat or whatever it is, maybe angle. I don't know. But I think that's your plan when you're talking about neutralizing the Miami pass rush that in theory is going to be pretty good. That's how you have to approach it. Gators offensive line is going to be very critical. I said Giants offensive line because I covered the Giants for Sports Illustrated as well. And both offensive lines were really bad last year. So a lot of parallels there. But Florida, again, in theory, addressed a lot of the issues on the offensive line. But we have to see it in practice and not just in theory. And in practice, I just mean in execution. And until then, jury's out for me on the offensive line for Florida and the defensive line for Miami. We will talk about the next thing that I think will decide this game against the Miami Hurricanes next on Locked On Gators. I don't know about you. I get tired after lunch basically every single day. Even when I eat a light lunch, it's just like, my body just goes, you consumed something. Let's go to bed. So I need to juice up a little bit, And in fact, research, by the way, shows that more than 70% of us hit a wall after lunch. let a 5-hour energy shot help you leap over the wall or run through that thing instead of just crashing into it Wile E. Coyote style, which I don't blame you if it happens to you. I really don't. It's tough. But with zero sugar, which is relevant for me, carb guy, and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. And the 5-hour energy website has a ton of flavors: watermelon, tropical burst, berry. My favorite is grape. I like grape anything. So that's my favorite there. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-hour energy product today, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews in the podcast and on YouTube. And the next deciding factor for the Florida Gators in this game on Saturday, I think you have to look at the Gators' defensive backs. Again, we don't have an official depth chart yet, but my guess would be that the depth chart looks like outside corner, Jason Marshall Jr., Devin Moore, safeties, Jordan Castell, Asa Turner, star, nickel, Sharif Denson. For Florida, that means you've got a new starter at one of your safety spots, a new starter at the nickel, and a new starter at one of your outside corner spots. I understand Devin Moore has started a game before. Let's be real here. It's first time as a starter this season, or this season is his first time as a true starter. So new starters at those three spots. Miami has 3 receivers on their roster that last year had 800 receiving yards. Granted, one of those receivers did not do that at Miami, and I need to get that point off because I need the Miami fans that go, we had 3 800-yard receivers returning. I need you to know how stupid you are if that's something you say. Okay? Need you to know how stupid you are if you go, well, we have 3 800-yard receivers returning. No, you don't. You have 2 800-yard receivers returning and 1 joining your team. He did not have 800 yards at Miami, where he was the wide receiver 1 at Houston. You see how that makes you sound stupid? Production he did elsewhere. He comes over and you're like, oh yeah, he's a returning 800-yard receiver. Be real here. All right. But Xavier Restrepo, very productive out of the slot last year. Obviously, he lined up in the outside as well, but better as a slot receiver last year. You've got Jacoby George is back, probably going to be pretty productive this year as well. He's one that I was like, well, kind of thought he might go to the NFL after last season. Chose not to, but Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George are back. Sam Brown has been added to the team. Apparently, Elijah Arroyo is the greatest tight end that's ever lived, according to Miami fans. Yeah, I would expect Miami to take at least a few shots deep throughout the game. And I think they should. Right? I mean, last year, Miami threw the ball deep. About 10 to 15% of their total passing plays were deep shots. Probably expect to see a similar-ish rate to that this year. Maybe more. You have obviously more faith in Cam Ward. But however, he could also just take the underneath throws if they're there. He has actually been historically more of a conservative guy that we think about with big arm. He's actually been conservative when it comes to taking those deep shots. But I think this year we could see probably something shake up and change there. Maybe it's because of the better offensive line. Maybe it's because better pass catchers. But also, I would say, hey, the Florida Gators secondary is unproven at quite a few spots. Last year, they were susceptible to giving up big plays. Miami should take those shots. And for Florida, that's what makes your DBs such a big deciding factor here. Obviously, your pass rush has to get home, but there could be plays where Miami goes, hey, we're going to have a tight end and a running back in pass pro. We're going to have 7 blocking for us, 3 guys running routes, and our QB. And we're going to get a deep shot off here. And for Florida, and I'm telling you now, I'm expecting that to be the first play of the game, a deep shot. Like that, no doubt in my mind, honestly. I'm like, Miami seemed, first off, Florida gave up a bomb first play last year. And, you got Cam Ward, this great offensive line, good weapons. Why not take that shot, right? Against a secondary that last year was susceptible to giving up big plays. Makes perfect sense. But again, for Florida, your DBs, they're tall, they're fast. Like that's been one thing that Florida's done consistently under Billy Napier. Bring in big, fast, athletic overall DBs with long arms, like the physical tools are there. It's just about actually teaching them to play corner. Hopefully, with Will Harris added to the coaching staff, that will happen. I'm pretty confident in Will Harris's ability to develop. I mean, my stance overall has been he was at Washington for a few years where they produced multiple first-round picks in the secondary. Granted, Jimmy Lake was their head coach or DC, and he's historically one of the best defensive back coaches around. So the way that I look at Will Harris is either he was doing a lot of the work that got guys drafted in the first round, or he was watching that guy do that work that was developing these guys as the first-round picks. So the way that I look at it, he was hands-on there. So the way that I look at it is he's got that experience. He's been there. He's done that. Now do it here. You've got great athletes. You can truly put together a great secondary with a bit of coaching. It can happen. And, I mean, they're getting tested right out the gate. Right out the gate. We've talked about it last week. It was maybe the week before, where Florida last year on a per-play basis was pretty decent defensively. It's just that when it came to giving up big plays, they were one of the worst in the country. That's what it was. It wasn't, that, every play was picking up 8-10 yards. No, it's that you'd have a few good plays and then just a back-breaking explosive play. Limit that. Secondary needs to be better this year. It's got to be a deciding factor in this game where it's an air raid offense, good weapons, good offensive line. So QB is probably going to have time to throw, which isn't even an indictment of your defensive line. I think if you generate pressure, then it's like, okay, maybe you do have a pretty damn good D-line. But if you don't generate a ton of pressure, I'm not shocked about that. Miami is expected to have a really good offensive line. We will talk about the final deciding factor next on Locked On Gators. Hey, Locked On Gators fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do, Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. I'll tell you what, screw the ad copy, okay? I'm going to tell you a story here. Took over Mississippi State, right? And I was like, you know what? We're going to run an air raid. Going to run a zone blitz scheme. I got fired right before recording. I was like, you know what? Let me finish one more season. I got the little exclamation mark like, hey, if you don't improve, you're going to get fired. I got fired. Not great for us at Mississippi State, but Ultimate College Football head coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Use promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store, and receive a free boost to your program. To download the game, visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on either of the app stores and begin your coaching legacy today with Ultimate College Football head coach. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day, every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And like I've said multiple times before, and I will continue to say until I'm proven wrong, which I don't think I'll be proven wrong this week, at least. The Swamp. It's going to play a key part in the Florida Gators versus Miami Hurricanes game this week. And I was talking with someone earlier, and we were on the phone. And we were like, you know what? Typically, historically, quarterbacks play worse in the first game of the season. Historically, quarterbacks play worse in the first game of the season. They do, because they generate more chemistry as the season goes on, things like that, right? So historically, quarterbacks perform worse in the first game of the season. Historically, quarterbacks struggle and perform worse at the Swamp. Okay? Two big factors, right? Historically, Cam Ward plays considerably worse on the road than he does at home. You can look it up if you want. Almost 8% completion percentage worse. Yards per attempt are down. Yards per completion are down. So even when he does complete passes, down. More interceptions, less touchdowns. He's historically worse, significantly worse rating. Every metric you look at, he's worse on the road than he is at home. Pair that with, again, quarterbacks typically struggle earlier. Quarterbacks typically struggle in Gainesville. They're less productive. They're less efficient. They're less effective. I'm just saying, you pair those together, and it's tough. Just that historically quarterbacks are worse there, and he's worse on the road throughout his career. And I understand Shannon Dawson was like, oh, he's played in big games on the road before. Kinda. But he hasn't played in as big a game on the road before. He hasn't played in the swamp before. It's hard enough to win in the swamp. And I know there's Miami fans in the Twitter spaces and online that are like, oh, yeah, it's real hard to win at the swamp. Arkansas won there last year. The only 2 losses that Florida had in the swamp last year were to Arkansas and Florida State, who beat you guys as well, who went 13-0. And yeah, they had a backup quarterback. Florida had Max Brown playing, who's now at Charlotte. Okay. So yeah, I don't take that as, oh yeah, it's hard. It's easy to win in the swamp. No, it isn't, dummy. It's never been easy to win in the swamp, especially to start the year. Florida's won what? 32, 33 straight home openers. Come on now. Like let's be a little honest here. Florida's historically great at home. And even when they've been not good in recent years, they've still been good at home. Swamp always shows up. Cam Ward, historically, throughout his career, worse on the road. Quarterbacks in general, historically in recent years especially, have struggled in the swamp compared to when they play at their home or even when they play at other places on the road. They play worse in the swamp. So it's not just, yeah, quarterbacks are typically worse on the road. It's that they may be worse on the road, but they are even worse in the swamp. Okay. And now there's a new thing with communication here, right? The helmet communication, the play call goes through the helmet to the quarterback. They get to communicate that to the line, get things going. Yeah. Do you know how hard it's going to be for Cam Ward to hear the helmet call properly when the crowd's just rocking pre-snap? Like, the crowd knows that now there's helmet communication. The crowd knows, hey, we've got to be loud the entire time. Crowd knows that. Crowd's going to be loud. That will probably cause an issue. If Cam needs to make an audible, you're going to have to do things silently, right? You have to. Offensive line communication. A little bit easier being right next to each other. Still might be a little tough for center to tackle communication there. Center to tight end communication there. Still might struggle there, especially because you got a new center in his first game for Miami in the swamp. Going to be a bit tough there. Granted, he's played in big game atmospheres before. He's played in loud stadiums before. Granted, you know, Miami had a new center last year. By the way, last year, early in the season, offensive line was probably at its worst, where offensive lines typically get better as the year goes on. So makes sense, right? It's all about chemistry, all about communication. That's probably going to be thrown off. You could work with a silent count, sure. Those typically still tend to have some sort of communication issue, delay of game, whatever, maybe false start. There's going to be factors there of the swamp. That's why Florida has historically been very good at home. Even when they've been bad, period, they've been very good at home. I know Miami fans can say whatever they want, but tough to go into the swamp and win a football game. That's all I'm saying, especially with a new quarterback, new center, things trying to gel. Little rough there, gonna be honest with you. And then also there's communication on the back end, secondary communicating to each other. A lot of space gets covered there. Communication needs to be right. Can't be playing the game of telephone. Crowd could be loud at times, right? So you'll find out 93,000 people are going to be there this weekend. You'll find out. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon, and I will see you all next time.